What a title is to her as the whisper that changed everything. It was my birthday, but I didn't feel like celebrating. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, and yet I had that small stubborn hope that today might be different. I had no idea how wrong I was. I remember sitting on the porch, the morning sun brushing my face, trying to shake off the loneliness that had become my shadow. Then I heard her voice, my daughter. She leaned close to her husband, and in that fleeting whisper, I didn't catch much, just a hint of mischief, a tone that should have made me smile. But something about it unsettled me, though I didn't understand why. They arrived at my door, laughing and talking like everything was normal. My daughter gave me a warm hug and kissed my cheek. Her husband smiled, but there was a tension in his eyes I couldn't place. As we sat down for breakfast, I noticed small things, tiny gestures, hurried glances, words that didn't quite fit, but I brushed it off. Perhaps it was my imagination. Hours passed, and I felt a strange emptiness, as if something invisible was slipping through my fingers. Later, my daughter asked me to follow her to the garden. She wanted to show me something, she said. It'll make your day special. I trusted her, of course. Mothers do. Meanwhile, her husband drove slowly through the winding streets. He looked calm, but his fingers gripped the steering wheel as if he were holding back a storm. A storm I didn't know existed. In the garden, my daughter handed me a small gift. I opened it, and for a moment, I forgot everything else. It was perfect, thoughtful, personal, and somehow heartwarming. She smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And then she said it, the words I will never forget. Mom, don't worry. Just enjoy this. I'll handle everything. It should have been innocent. It should have been simple. But the tone, the insistence, it was strangely commanding, almost rehearsed. I felt a chill that I couldn't explain. Hours later, I received a call. My daughter's husband had returned to the house, but not alone. There was a confrontation, a misunderstanding, and suddenly everything I had taken for granted, the trust, the love, the safety was gone. I raced to my home, but the doors were locked. Inside, chaos. My possessions scattered, my memories disrupted, my sanctuary violated. And then I saw them, my daughter, trembling, and her husband, cold, distant, almost unrecognizable. What happened? I demanded. But the words caught in my throat, because part of me already knew. My daughter's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I didn't know it would go this far, she whispered. I just wanted to protect you, to distract you. Tuto, her voice broke. Her husband avoided my gaze, and suddenly I understood. The whisper. The plan. What I thought was a celebration had been a distraction. And the betrayal was closer to me than I could have ever imagined. Days blurred into nights. The weight of their actions pressed on me like a stone in my chest. I wrestled with anger, with heartbreak, with the bitter taste of betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound could. But alongside the pain, there was a lesson slowly emerging, subtle but unrelenting. I learned about human frailty, about the shadows we sometimes hide even from those we love. I learned that intentions, no matter how well-meaning, can spiral into disaster when trust is compromised. And I learned that forgiveness, though hard, is not a weakness, it is a power. In the silence that followed, I began to rebuild, not just the home, but the fragile fragments of faith I still held. I began to see my daughter not as the orchestrator of betrayal, but as a human being who stumbled, who acted out of fear and misguided love. And I saw her husband not as a villain, but as a man capable of remorse, trapped by his own mistakes. Months passed. Conversations that were once unbearable became possible. Tears gave way to understanding. And in the quiet moments, when the sun touched my face just so, I felt the slow pulse of healing. On my next birthday, there was a cake again, laughter again, but this time it was tempered with the weight of lessons learned. My daughter held my hand and whispered, not in secrecy, but with honesty, Mom, I'm sorry. I promise no more secrets. And in that moment, I realized that life is fragile, yes, and people are flawed, yes, but the bonds we choose to nurture, the patience we summon, and the faith we keep alive can turn even the deepest wounds into something that teaches us how to love better, how to forgive, and how to survive. The whisper that once filled me with unease had transformed into a promise that even in darkness, hope could find its way back. And as I blew out the candles that day, I didn't just wish for happiness. I wished for the strength to accept, to forgive, and to embrace the imperfect, messy, and beautiful journey of life with those I love, no matter how far we stumble along the way. Because in the end, love is not about perfection. It's about surviving the betrayals, enduring the pain, and holding on long enough to find redemption. And that, I realized, was the most powerful gift of all. The days after that birthday were quieter, but the air was heavier, filled with memories of what had happened and the fragility of trust. Every time I looked at my daughter, I saw both the child I had raised and the young woman who had made a terrible choice. It was hard not to feel a lingering sting, but I reminded myself that anger, if carried too long, can destroy what love is left. Her husband, too, changed in small ways. He didn't try to charm me or pretend the past never existed. Instead, he worked silently, taking responsibility for the parts he could fix. At first, I resisted letting him back into our lives, but slowly, I began to see glimmers of sincerity, small gestures, quiet apologies, the weight of regret in his eyes. We began to rebuild the home, and more importantly, the relationships. Meals were shared, conversations were attempted, and tears were shed. Sometimes frustration boiled over, but each argument, each tension, taught me patience and the importance of listening, even when I didn't want to. One evening, months later, my daughter and I were sitting on the porch, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in shades of gold. She reached for my hand and whispered, "Mom, do you think we can ever move past this completely?" I paused, feeling the heaviness of the question. "We can try," I said softly. "We can heal. But it takes time and courage. You've shown me your courage in admitting your mistakes. Now we just have to let time do the rest." That night, I realized something important. Forgiveness is not a one-time act. It's a series of decisions, day after day, to choose love over resentment, trust over doubt. And it's not just for the people who wronged us. It's for ourselves, so that we can live without carrying the poison of bitterness. But the story didn't end there. Life has a way of testing us again, often when we least expect it. One rainy evening, I received a call. A situation arose that required all of us to work together, to rely on one another in ways that demanded trust and bravery. And in that moment, I saw the full circle of what had happened. The same daughter who once whispered a secret that almost destroyed us was now the one helping to protect us, to guide us through danger, to show strength and resilience. It was then I understood mistakes do not define a person. Redemption does. And love, real, enduring love, is not blind. It sees the flaws, the failures, and the betrayals, and it chooses, again and again, to stay. Years later, when I look back at that fateful birthday, I no longer feel anger or betrayal. I feel gratitude for the lessons it brought. The understanding of human fragility, the value of patience, and the power of forgiveness. That whisper, once a signal of deception, became a symbol of growth, of the journey from hurt to healing. On my next birthday, I stood in the kitchen, watching my daughter and her husband prepare a small celebration. Their laughter was genuine, free from fear or deceit. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. I realized that love, though tested, had endured. It had been battered and bruised, but it had survived. And that survival, that unwavering thread of connection, was the most beautiful thing life had ever given me. And so, as I blew out the candles, I didn't just wish for happiness. I wished for wisdom, for patience, and for the courage to keep choosing love, no matter the scars, no matter the past. Because in the end, it is the way we rise after being broken that defines us, and it is the way we forgive that makes our hearts whole again. From that day on, every whisper in my life, every quiet word, every hidden intention, reminded me of one thing: life is unpredictable. People are imperfect, but love, patience, and forgiveness are the forces that can turn even the darkest moments into light. And in that understanding, I finally found peace. The whisper had changed everything, but in the end, it had given me everything I truly needed. Months turned into years, and life slowly settled into a rhythm neither too bright nor too bleak, just steady enough to allow the heart to breathe. My daughter grew stronger, more grounded, and I saw a determination in her eyes that had been absent before. She had learned the hard way how fragile trust is, and yet she had chosen to rebuild it, brick by brick, not just with me, but with herself. Her husband, too, had changed. He was quieter now, less arrogant, more careful with words, with actions. The mistakes of that past hung over him like a shadow, but instead of letting it crush him, he carried it as a weight of accountability. He became someone we could rely on in small, meaningful ways, helping neighbors, volunteering, taking responsibility when life demanded it. And slowly, I found that my fear of him had faded, replaced by cautious respect. One afternoon, as I was sorting through old photographs, I stumbled upon a picture of my daughter as a little girl. Her eyes were bright, full of wonder and innocence. I felt a pang of sorrow, thinking about how much she had lost in those few years, the simplicity, the trust, the carefree laughter. But then I realized that life had given her something even more valuable: awareness, resilience, and a deep understanding of consequences. I called her into the room, holding the photograph. She looked at it and smiled faintly. "I used to be so fearless," she said. "I didn't know the world could hurt this much." I nodded. "And yet, here you are. Stronger, wiser, still capable of love. That's what matters." For a long moment we sat in silence. And in that silence, I understood something essential: people are not defined by their worst moments, but by how they rise afterward. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about allowing yourself to move forward without carrying the weight of resentment. Years later, life threw another challenge at us. A crisis at work for her husband, an unexpected illness in the family, small but piercing reminders that life is never truly stable. And yet, we faced it together. The bond that had been tested, torn, and nearly broken now held stronger than ever. The same daughter who once whispered secrets to distract me was now a partner in survival, a source of unwavering loyalty and love. And in those moments, I finally understood betrayal does not have to end in destruction. Pain does not have to lead to bitterness. Life is messy, unpredictable, and unfair, but it also allows redemption, growth, and love to flourish if we dare to embrace it. On my next birthday, there was a small celebration. Not grand, not ostentatious, just simple. My daughter brought me flowers, her husband prepared a modest meal, and we laughed over memories that were both painful and healing. I realized that the happiness I felt was not the fleeting joy of gifts or attention. It was the profound peace of knowing that we had survived the storms together, that we had endured, and that we had chosen love over anger, trust over suspicion, and hope over despair. And in that quiet, heartfelt moment, I whispered to myself what I had learned through the years. Life is fragile, people are flawed, and mistakes are inevitable. But patience, forgiveness, and the courage to keep choosing love can transform even the deepest wounds into wisdom. The whisper that had once brought fear and betrayal had, in the end, brought understanding and growth. It had reminded me that life's true power lies not in avoiding pain, but in how we rise from it. And as I watched my daughter and her husband laughing together, I felt a surge of gratitude for everything: the pain, the lessons, the love that endured. Because in the end, that whisper didn't just change everything, it taught me what truly matters: family, forgiveness, and the strength to keep believing in the goodness of people, even after the worst has happened. And with that realization, I finally allowed myself to breathe fully, to love without fear, and to embrace the imperfect, beautiful, unpredictable journey of life. The echo of that fateful whisper lingered, but now it was no longer a warning. It had become a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can be found, love can survive, and hearts can heal. And in that, I found everything I had been searching for. Years went by, and life continued in its quiet rhythm, teaching us subtle lessons every day. My daughter became more responsible, more empathetic, not just because of what had happened with me, but because she had truly seen the consequences of her actions. She carried the memory of that whisper with a mix of guilt and wisdom, and I could see that it shaped her in ways no one else could. Her husband changed too, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. He learned humility, the weight of trust, and the fragility of relationships. He began making small gestures, not for praise, but out of understanding. The man who had once been capable of betrayal became someone who understood the depth of love and the price of mistakes. And in that, I found a strange sense of relief. I had survived, and so had they, but now we were stronger, tempered by fire. One evening, as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the garden, my daughter came to me with tears in her eyes. "Mom," she said softly, "do you ever regret forgiving me?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years in my chest. "No," I said, "I don't regret forgiving you. Forgiveness isn't just for you. It's for me too. Holding on to anger would have only poisoned my own heart. Letting go, letting love survive, that's the true gift." She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, all the fear, all the betrayal, all the pain, felt like it had been washed away by understanding. Time continued its flow. Birthdays came and went. The house filled with laughter, the quiet moments were no longer lonely, and the weight of the past no longer pressed upon us every day. But we never forgot. We carried those memories like bookmarks in the story of our lives, reminders of how fragile life can be and how resilient the heart can become. Years later, my daughter became a mother herself. Watching her cradle her child, I saw the same innocence I had once seen in her, but also the wisdom earned through hardship. She whispered to her own child gently, carefully, aware of how much weight even a single word can carry. And in that, I realized that the cycle of life is as much about learning from pain as it is about experiencing joy. I would often sit quietly, reflecting on the journey that started with a single whisper, the whisper that nearly destroyed us, the whisper that carried secrets, the whisper that changed everything. It had tested our hearts, our patience, our love, and ultimately, it had taught us how to survive, how to forgive, and how to truly love. And I understood fully that life is a delicate balance of joy and sorrow, trust and betrayal, hope and despair. We cannot avoid pain, but we can choose how it shapes us. We cannot control others, but we can control how we respond. And we cannot undo the past, but we can choose to let it guide us toward a better future. As I sat on the porch one quiet evening, the sky painted with the soft colors of dusk, I whispered to myself, just as my daughter had whispered to me all those years ago, "Life is fragile, people are flawed, but love can endure everything." And in that whisper, I found peace, closure, and the most powerful lesson of all, that even in betrayal, even in heartbreak, there is a chance for redemption, for growth, and for a love that survives. The whisper had changed everything, but in the end, it had given me everything I truly needed. And so, I smiled, letting the past settle into its place, knowing that the future, though uncertain, was filled with hope, patience, and the enduring power of love. Because sometimes, the smallest whisper carries the heaviest truth, and the deepest pain can lead to the strongest heart. As the years passed, I noticed subtle changes in the way we all interacted. There was a quiet understanding between us now, unspoken but deeply felt. My daughter no longer flinched when I spoke my mind. She no longer hesitated to share her thoughts. Her husband, once distant and guarded, became someone I could count on. It wasn't perfect, no healing ever is, but it was real, steady, and full of cautious hope. One rainy afternoon, I found myself sitting by the window, watching droplets race down the glass, remembering the day everything had begun. That whisper, that small, fleeting sound, had set off a chain of events that could have destroyed us. And yet here we were, alive, scarred, but stronger. I realized that life doesn't give second chances often, but when it does, it demands patience, humility, and courage to take them. My daughter joined me, carrying a cup of tea. She sat silently beside me, not speaking, just letting the rain and quiet fill the space. Then she said, "Mom, I still think about that day. I still feel guilty." I took her hand and held it firmly. "Guilt is part of the journey," I said softly. "But it doesn't have to define you. What matters is what you do after. And look at you, you've chosen to rebuild, to love, to be better. That's more than enough." She looked at me, eyes glistening, and I saw the weight of years lift slightly from her shoulders. That moment, small as it was, felt monumental. We didn't need grand gestures or elaborate apologies anymore. The quiet acknowledgement of our pain, the shared commitment to move forward, was enough. Time went on. My daughter's family grew, laughter filled corners that had once been empty, and even her husband learned to embrace the warmth he had avoided for so long. And in those moments, I began to understand the true depth of forgiveness, not just letting go of anger, but choosing to trust, to hope, and to open your heart again, even when it trembles. One evening, as we celebrated my birthday quietly at home, I watched them laugh, the way they held each other's hands, the small glances that spoke volumes, and I realized that what had almost torn us apart had ultimately taught us the most profound lesson of all, that love is not fragile. It is enduring. It bends, it cracks, it sometimes breaks, but it can always be repaired if hearts are willing. As the candles flickered and I made my silent wish, I thought of that day long ago, the whisper, the deception, the heartbreak. And I smiled, because the story hadn't ended in pain. It had ended in growth, understanding, and a love stronger than I could have imagined. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, echoing the words my daughter had once spoken. Life is unpredictable, people are flawed, but love can endure everything. The whisper that once shook my world had transformed into a symbol of survival, of hope, and of the unbreakable bonds of family. And I knew, without a doubt, that no matter what storms life sent our way, we would face them together, hearts healed, spirits strengthened, and love guiding every step. Because sometimes, the smallest whisper carries the heaviest truth, and the deepest pain can lead to the strongest heart. And that was the gift life had given me, not perfection, not certainty, but the courage to love fiercely, forgive deeply, and live fully. The whisper had changed everything. And in the end, it had given me everything I truly needed. Years later, I would tell this story to my grandchildren, not to warn them, but to teach them life will challenge you, people will hurt you, and the world will test your faith. But if you carry patience, forgiveness, and love in your heart, no whisper, no betrayal, no heartbreak can ever truly break you. And as they listened, wide-eyed and silent, I realized that the lessons of the past were now seeds for the future. A future where love endures, hearts heal, and the whispers of life, no matter how dark at first, can lead to light beyond imagination. The whisper had changed everything. But in the end, it had given us everything. And that, finally, was enough.